Have you ever imagined that a phone call that sounds polite, procedural, and completely legitimate could turn a retired couple into people carrying a name they never created and medical bills they never signed? They did not lose all their money that day. There was no moment where their bank account vanished in minutes. Everything happened so smoothly that they later mentioned it to their neighbors as an ordinary interaction. It was just a call to update their Medicare records, just a few confirmation questions, just a courteous reminder that the system needed their cooperation to avoid any disruption of benefits. And that is what makes this story more disturbing than most financial scams. When you do not lose money immediately, you do not sense danger. You do not call the bank. You do not report anything. You continue living your life believing you just acted responsibly. Then weeks pass, months pass. Something starts to feel off. A notice for a medical service you never used. A copay you do not recognize. A call from a clinic you have never visited. Only then do you realize that what was taken was not just money. It was your identity, your benefits, and the sense of peace you thought your retirement years were meant to bring. According to official warnings, scammers impersonating Medicare and health insurance providers often reach out through unexpected calls or messages to collect Medicare numbers, social security numbers, or personal data. That information is later used for medical fraud or identity theft. Even phone numbers that appear legitimate can be spoofed, a risk publicly warned about by the HHS Office of Inspector General. My name is Dolan. On Financial Secrets, I do not tell stories to make you panic. I tell them to help you see an uncomfortable but necessary truth. The most dangerous scams do not require greed. They only require you to believe you are doing the right thing. Dolan remembers clearly the morning Mr. and Mrs. Harris began their day, just like thousands of retirement mornings before it. Florida sunlight filled the kitchen. A small radio played the familiar morning news. 2 cups of coffee sat side by side on the table. They had lived in this house for over 30 years. No debt, no flashy spending, no risky investments. To them, good finances meant stability and peace of mind. Mr. Harris was 68. Mrs. Harris was 65. Medicare was not an abstract concept to them. It was the reward for a lifetime of work, a system they trusted completely. They had filled out forms their entire lives. So, when the phone rang and the voice on the other end explained that this was a Medicare record update to prevent any disruption of benefits, nothing felt suspicious. The voice was professional, not rushed, not threatening. The caller knew Mr. Harris's full name, their home address, that they were enrolled in Medicare Part A and Part B. Everything sounded accurate enough to feel reassuring. The caller explained that the system was reviewing records after recent updates and only needed confirmation of a few basic details. No payment requested. No money transfer. Just confirmation. Mrs. Harris even wrote down the time of the call in a small notebook by the phone, a habit from her working years. The call lasted less than 10 minutes. It ended with a polite thank you and a wish for good health. They did not discuss it afterward. They did not call Medicare back. They did not tell anyone. In their minds, this was simply part of how the system worked. Days passed, then weeks, then months. They went to routine checkups, grocery shopping, social gatherings in their community. Nothing felt off. And that silence was the most dangerous part. Scams like this do not need immediate reactions. They need time, they need data, and they need the victim to keep believing everything is fine. Dolan emphasizes that this is exactly why people over 60 are ideal targets. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they have clean credit histories, real medical records, legitimate insurance benefits. When their identity is used, the system does not detect it immediately. Fake medical bills appear gradually. Claims are processed automatically, and by the time an unfamiliar letter arrives, the damage is already deep. Mr. and Mrs. Harris did not yet know that their names were appearing in places they had never been, on services they had never received, and that a chain of financial consequences was quietly forming without warning. 3 months after the call, the first envelope appeared in their mailbox. Not a bill, not a warning, just an explanation of benefits using terminology they had seen for years. Mrs. Harris opened it, glanced over it, and set it aside. The amount was small. The service sounded ordinary. She assumed it was an administrative error. A week later, another envelope arrived. Then another. Each letter looked legitimate. Familiar logos, standard language, no signs of forgery. But one detail kept repeating. The services were from places they had never visited. A physical therapy clinic in another county. A specialized test Mr. Harris was never prescribed. A medical device they never received. Mr. Harris called the customer service number on the letter. After a long hold, a polite but mechanical voice explained that the services had been provided. Electronic signatures were on file. Authorization codes confirmed. Everything appeared valid. If he wished to dispute the charges, he would need to file a formal appeal and wait several months for review. For the first time, Mr. Harris felt something was wrong. Not fear, but loss of control. He had done everything right his entire life. Paid taxes, followed rules, avoided fraud. And now the system was telling him actions had been taken under his name without his knowledge. Over the following weeks, the situation escalated quietly. A notice from a supplemental insurer citing unusually high service usage. A call from a clinic confirming a future appointment. Another letter mentioning unpaid copays. Each event alone seemed minor. Together, they formed a frightening picture. Mrs. Harris began losing sleep. Not because of money, they could still cover daily expenses, but because of the feeling that her identity was being used as a tool by someone else. Every phone call startled her. Every mailbox check raised her heart rate. When they finally contacted Medicare directly, the answer was devastating. Mr. Harris's record showed multiple claims from different medical facilities. Some paid, some pending. The representative explained this was a classic sign of medical identity theft. Resolution could take months or even years. During that time, benefits could be delayed or monitored. Reports from federal agencies warn that this type of fraud is especially dangerous because victims rarely detect it early. Personal data is used to create false medical histories, making cleanup far more complex than direct financial theft. It is not just financial damage. It is administrative burden, psychological stress, and the feeling of betrayal by a system they trusted. Dolan realized something critical. Scammers do not need to break the system. They only need to exploit it. They understand that when everything moves slowly and follows procedure, victims doubt themselves before suspecting fraud. And this was only the beginning. The breaking point did not arrive as a sudden shock. It came on an ordinary afternoon when Mr. Harris opened a thicker envelope than usual. Not an explanation of benefits, not a routine notice. A consolidated medical bill. The number forced him to read it twice. Tens of thousands of dollars for advanced services he had never heard of. Medicare had covered part of it. The rest was listed as patient responsibility. For the first time, Mr. Harris felt real fear. Not because of the immediate amount, but because he understood what it meant. His identity was no longer used once. It had become the foundation of organized medical fraud. And the system now viewed him as the center of it. The next call with Medicare carried a different tone. His record could be flagged for fraud. Future claims would face scrutiny. Some benefits could be temporarily suspended. Emergency care could be delayed. That was when Mrs. Harris broke down. Not over money, but over losing the most basic sense of security. At their age, access to healthcare without barriers mattered most. And now even that was uncertain because of a 10-minute phone call they trusted. The days that followed were filled with paperwork, affidavits, identity confirmations, federal agency contacts. No one could offer a timeline. Dolan observed that what broke them was not the work itself. It was being forced to prove their innocence in a system they never questioned. Every form implied doubt. Every question required reconfirming their life. Then one detail aligned everything. The misuse of Mr. Harris's identity began exactly after the Medicare update call. No money exchanged, no obvious scam, just voluntary information. Officials warn this is the most dangerous aspect of Medicare impersonation scams. Scammers do not need payment. They need data. By the time consequences surface, recovery is long and complex. That night, Mr. Harris sat silently in the living room, staring at the growing stack of documents. Not angry, just empty. A lifetime of caution undone by misplaced trust. The climax of this story is not about the largest bill. It is about realizing what was lost is far harder to recover. Identity, benefits, and safety. Recovery did not begin with a clear solution. It began with accepting that nothing would return to normal quickly. They created a dedicated fraud file, copied every document, logged every call. Retirement life turned into administrative survival. But something shifted. They stopped trying to handle it alone. They contacted official medical fraud support channels, requested fraud notes on Medicare records, monitored credit reports, placed identity alerts. The process was slow and exhausting, but for the first time in months, they felt proactive instead of reactive. Dolan notes that many victims fail at this stage, not due to lack of information, but exhaustion. Medical fraud erodes through time. Quitting allows false data to remain for years. Gradually, progress came. Some claims were reversed, some fake services removed. The system was not perfect, but a boundary was drawn between the real person and the stolen identity. They learned a new level of vigilance, no answering unexpected insurance calls, verification through official channels only, no sharing sensitive data over the phone, small habits that did not erase the past but prevented repetition. Mrs. Harris later said the hardest part was believing she had outgrown the need for vigilance. This experience taught her otherwise. There is no age of immunity, only preparation. As benefits stabilized, life slowly regained rhythm. Not the same, but calmer. Trust was no longer blind. Knowledge became protection. This story teaches a different lesson from typical financial scams. It is not about greed. It is about misplaced trust. The danger is not immediate loss. It is delayed realization. When nothing obvious breaks, the mind lowers defenses. That space allows identity theft to grow. Federal agencies warn that identity-based medical fraud is rising because automated systems accept valid-looking data until proven otherwise. The burden of proof often falls on victims. Lesson 1 is simple. Medicare rarely calls asking for sensitive information. Official changes arrive in writing. Any urgent call deserves verification. Lesson 2 is that identity is as valuable as cash. A Medicare number can be reused for years. Monitoring benefits and mail is not paranoia. It is protection. Lesson 3 is that no age is immune. Familiarity with systems makes older adults ideal targets. Questioning is not rude. It is self-defense. Modern scams do not ask you to do something wrong. They ask you to do the right thing at the wrong time. Pause, verify, confirm independently. If you followed this story to the end, one thing is clear. Medicare and health insurance fraud is not someone else's problem. It is a quiet risk affecting millions approaching or living in retirement. Dolan does not want fear. He wants awareness. This week, take a moment to review how you or older family members interact with healthcare systems? Who answers calls? Who checks mail? Who monitors benefits? If you are over 60 or caring for parents, make verification a habit. Save official numbers. Set rules for phone interactions. Pause when uncertain. If this story reminded you of someone, share it, not to scare, but to prepare. On Financial Secrets, Dolan will continue sharing these quiet financial signals. If this helped you, subscribe. And if you want deeper coverage on scams targeting older adults, leave a comment. Your awareness today can prevent loss tomorrow.